I didn't fall in love. I disappeared into her. That's the part I never said out loud. You see, men like me don't fall. We calculate. We choose. We assess risk before we ever let something touch us. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Because if I'm honest, really honest, I wasn't choosing her. I was choosing the one place I didn't have to be him anymore. There's a difference, and it cost me more than I expected. It was late the first night I realized it. Not a dramatic night, no storm, no music playing in the background, just a quiet room, dim light spilling from a half-dead lamp in the corner. The kind of silence that stretches so thin, it almost snaps. She was sitting across from me, barefoot, talking about something small, something I should have forgotten by now, but I remember the way her voice didn't demand anything from me, no expectations, no performance, and for a moment, I stopped calculating. Do you know how rare that is? To not measure your words, to not anticipate reactions, to not stay 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. I didn't feel powerful in that moment. I felt relieved, and that should have been my first warning. Because relief can be addictive. It sneaks in quietly. It tells you, stay here. This is safe. And before you realize it, you're not standing beside someone. You're hiding behind them. That's what I did. I let her become the place I escaped to, instead of the person I stood beside. Every time life pressed in, every expectation, every decision, every weight I carried, I'd go back to her. Not to share it, but to forget it. And she thought that meant I loved her deeply. Maybe part of me did. But another part, the part I don't like admitting, was just tired of being alone with myself. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody teaches you. Sometimes what feels like love is just the absence of your own pain. And when that pain comes back, you don't lose them. You lose the version of yourself you were pretending to be. That realization doesn't hit all at once. It builds, slowly, like a quiet tension you can't name. There were moments, small ones, that should have exposed me, like when she'd ask simple questions, not accusations, just curiosity. Are you okay? And I'd smile, every time, controlled, measured. Yeah, I'm good. But inside, there was this hesitation, a split second where something real tried to surface, something unpolished, uncontrolled, and I'd shut it down before it even formed, because if I told her the truth, if I let her see what was actually behind that calm exterior, would she still look at me the same way, or worse? Would I lose the only place I felt quiet? You ever notice how easy it is to be loved, when you only show the parts of yourself that are easy to love? That's not connection. That's editing. And I became very good at editing. Not lying. Just omitting. Which, if you think about it long enough, might be worse. I started needing her in a way I couldn't explain, not because she completed me, but because she distracted me. From the thoughts I didn't want to sit with, from the silence that felt too honest. She didn't know that when I looked at her, I wasn't just seeing her, I was seeing an exit. And that's a dangerous thing to make someone. There's this moment I keep replaying in my head, a quiet one. We were sitting close, not touching, just existing in the same space, night pressing softly against the windows, the kind of stillness that makes everything feel exposed. She leaned her head slightly toward me, not fully, just enough to close the distance if I wanted to, and I froze, not physically, internally, because in that split second, I had a choice, step forward, or stay hidden, and I remember thinking, clear as anything, if I let her in right now, she'll see everything. Not just the good, not just the controlled version, everything, and I wasn't ready for that. So, I did what I always do best, I stayed still. Tell me something. Have you ever been so close to being seen that you chose distance instead? Not because you didn't care, but because you cared enough to protect the illusion? Because that's where it starts, not with losing someone, but with deciding, quietly, internally, that they'll never really know you. And once that decision is made, everything after that just follows. I told myself I was protecting what we had, keeping things simple, clean, strong. But the truth, I was protecting myself from being exposed, from being known. And the worst part is, she trusted what I showed her. She believed it was all of me. And maybe that's when it stopped being love, and started becoming something else entirely. Something quieter, something more dangerous, something that looks perfect from the outside. But inside, it's already starting to fracture in ways you can't see yet. Power doesn't get lonely. People do. That's the lie I built my life on. From the outside, everything about me looked deliberate. Clean lines, precise moves. I didn't react. I decided. Rooms shifted when I entered them. Conversations slowed, recalibrated, adjusted to me. I made sure of that. Because control isn't something you stumble into. It's something you build, brick by brick, until nothing can touch you without your permission. And for a long time, it worked. But there's something no one tells you about control. The more you master it, the less you feel anything real. Not immediately. At first, it feels like clarity, focus, efficiency. You stop wasting energy on unnecessary emotion. You stop chasing validation. You become sharp, untouchable. But then, quietly, slowly, something else starts slipping away. Not your success, not your reputation, your connection. There were nights, more than I'd ever admit, where I'd sit alone in a room that looked like everything I used to dream about. Floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights stretching endlessly, silence so complete it felt expensive, and I'd just sit there. No music, no distractions, just me. And this strange, hollow stillness. It didn't feel like peace. It felt like something was missing, and I couldn't name it. I remember one night in particular. It was past midnight, the kind of hour where the world feels paused, no calls, no movement, just that heavy stillness pressing in from every direction. I poured a drink I didn't want, not for the taste, for the ritual, something to do with my hands while my mind wandered somewhere I didn't want it to go. I walked to the window, looked out over the city, thousands of people, thousands of lives moving, colliding, connecting, and I felt completely removed from all of it, like I was watching life instead of living it. That's when it hit me, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, uncomfortable realization that settled in and refused to leave. I had built a life where nothing could hurt me, and somehow, nothing could reach me either. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When you eliminate vulnerability, you don't just remove pain, you remove intimacy, and I didn't realize how far I had taken it. Every interaction became strategic, measured, controlled. Even laughter, real laughter, became rare, because real moments aren't predictable, and unpredictability was something I had trained myself to eliminate. You ever get so good at being who people expect that you forget what you actually feel? That was me. I knew exactly how to respond, how to lead, how to maintain presence. But when it came to something simple, something honest, how are you really? I didn't have an answer, not a real one, just versions that sounded right. And here's the part I hate admitting. People admired me for it. They saw strength, stability, control. They didn't see the distance. They didn't see the emptiness that followed me into every quiet moment, because I didn't let them, and that's the problem. When no one sees your truth, you start forgetting it exists. There's a cost to being untouchable. It's not isolation. Isolation can be peaceful. This was different. This was being surrounded by people, and still feeling like there was a wall no one could cross. Not because they couldn't, because I wouldn't let them. And the worst part? I convinced myself that was strength, that needing nothing meant I was winning. But deep down, somewhere I tried to ignore, there was this low, persistent tension, like something inside me was waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know. Or maybe I did. Then she walked into that life, and for the first time, something shifted, not externally, internally. Subtle, almost unnoticeable at first, but it disrupted everything I had built, because she didn't respond to the version of me I controlled. She responded to something else, something I hadn't fully looked at in a long time. And that's when the silence started changing. It wasn't as heavy, it wasn't as constant, but it also wasn't gone. Because no matter how much she softened the edges of my world, there was still a part of me she hadn't touched, a part I hadn't shown, a part that stayed hidden behind everything I had spent years constructing. Tell me something. What happens when someone walks into your life and quiets the noise, but doesn't know what's actually making it? Do you let them in deeper? Or do you protect the system that's been keeping you safe this whole time? Because I stood right there, in between those two choices. And I wish I could tell you I knew what I was doing, but the truth is, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, and I didn't trust it. Not yet. Not fully. And that hesitation, that small, almost invisible hesitation, that's where everything started to change. She didn't try to understand me, and somehow she saw everything. That's what unsettled me. I've spent years around people who study you, your tone, your posture, your patterns. They try to decode you like you're a problem to solve. She didn't do that. She just existed around me. And in that space, without pressure, without questions, something in me started loosening, not opening, not yet, but shifting. It happened in moments so small, they shouldn't have mattered. A quiet pause in conversation where she didn't rush to fill the silence. The way she looked at me when I wasn't speaking, like she wasn't waiting for something impressive to come out of my mouth. No expectation, no performance required, and that was the problem. Because when there's nothing to perform, you're left with who you actually are. There was a night I remember too clearly. We were in a dim room, soft light brushing against the walls, the kind that makes everything feel slower. The air was still. No noise except the occasional sound of the city far below. She was sitting across from me, knees pulled slightly in, watching me in a way that felt unguarded. Not intense, not interrogating. Just present. And I caught myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I hesitated, mid-sentence, lost my train of thought, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't know what version of myself to use. That had never happened before. Do you understand what that does to someone like me, when you've built your identity on always knowing who you are in every moment? And suddenly that certainty slips. It doesn't feel freeing. It feels dangerous. Because if you don't control the version, anything could come out, anything real. She smiled when I paused. Not because I said something clever, because I didn't. And that smile, it wasn't impressed. It was soft. Like she saw something behind the pause. Something I didn't even fully recognize myself. And instead of feeling seen, I felt exposed. Here's the truth I didn't want to face. Being understood is easy when you explain yourself. Being seen without explanation, that's terrifying. Because now you can't control the narrative. You can't guide the perception. You're just there. And she wasn't asking for clarification. She was accepting what she saw. That's when the tension started building. Not between us, inside me. Because every time she responded to something real, something unfiltered, I felt this pull. Part of me wanted to lean into it. Let it happen. Let her see more. But the other part, the part that built everything I rely on, was screaming to shut it down. I started noticing things I couldn't ignore. The way I became quieter around her. Not withdrawn, just less constructed. The way my usual control didn't feel as necessary, but also didn't feel safe to drop. And that contradiction, it kept growing. Because I didn't know who I was without that control, and she was getting closer to finding out. There was another moment. We were walking, late. Streetlights casting long shadows, the kind that make everything feel slightly unreal. She said something simple. I feel like there's more you don't say. No accusation, no pressure, just a statement. And I remember my chest tightening, not from fear of her, but from the accuracy of it, because she wasn't guessing, she was noticing. I could have deflected, changed the subject, made a joke, that's what I've always done. But something stopped me. For a second, just a second, I considered telling her the truth. Not all of it, just enough to test the ground. And that's when the internal conflict hit harder than anything I'd felt in a long time. Because once you start telling the truth, where do you stop? So I did what felt familiar. I gave her a controlled version, something close enough to feel honest, but distant enough to keep me safe, and she accepted it. Of course she did. She wasn't trying to expose me. She wasn't trying to win. She was just there. And that made it worse, because now the responsibility was mine. She wasn't forcing anything, which meant every layer I kept hidden was a choice. Let me ask you something. What do you do when someone sees parts of you? You've spent years making sure no one ever notices. Do you trust them? Or do you start building new walls, even higher than before? Because I stood right there, between being known and staying protected. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't know which one was stronger. I told myself I had time, that I could let this unfold slowly, that I could decide later how much of myself I was willing to give. But deep down, I knew something wasn't adding up, because the more she saw without asking, the harder it became to keep pretending she didn't. And that's when the real pressure started, not from her, from me. Because there's a limit to how long you can stand in front of someone who sees you, while continuing to hide. At some point, you either step forward, or you start stepping back without even realizing it. The night I almost told the truth. Nothing dramatic happened. That's what makes it dangerous. No argument, no breaking point, no visible reason for anything to fall apart. Just a quiet room, and a version of me I couldn't ignore anymore. It was late, the kind of late where even the city feels like it's holding its breath. Lights dimmed, shadows stretching across the walls like they were trying to reach something. She was asleep beside me, peaceful, unaware, and I was wide awake, not restless, not anxious, just still, staring at the ceiling like it might force something out of me if I looked long enough. You ever reach a point where silence stops feeling empty and starts feeling loud? That's where I was, because there was something inside me that night, something I had been keeping under control for a long time, and it wasn't quiet anymore. It was pressing, not aggressively, but persistently, like it had been waiting for the right moment, and this was it. I turned my head slightly, looked at her. Her breathing was steady, slow, the kind of calm you don't question, and for a second, I envied it, because inside me, there was no calm. There was a conversation happening, and I was losing control of it. Tell her. The thought came in clean, direct, uncomplicated. No strategy, no calculation, just truth. And immediately, another voice pushed back. Not like this. That's the thing about people like me. We don't reject truth. We delay it. We reshape it. Wait for the perfect moment, the right tone, the controlled version. But honesty doesn't wait. It shows up when it wants to, and if you don't face it, it starts turning into something else. I sat up slightly, resting my weight on my hands. The room felt heavier from this angle, like the air had thickened. My chest tightened, not sharply, but enough to notice. Enough to know this wasn't something I could ignore, not tonight. I started thinking about everything I hadn't said, not the obvious things, the subtle ones, the moments where I chose silence over truth, the things I filtered, adjusted, held back. Not because they were lies, but because they were too real. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't destroy connection with one big lie. You do it with 1,000 small silences, and I could feel all of them that night, stacked, unspoken, sitting between us, even as she slept inches away. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, hands clasped loosely. For a moment, I let myself imagine it, waking her up, saying her name softly, telling her everything I had been holding back. Not the polished version, the real one, the doubts, the distance, the way I wasn't as present as she believed I was, the way part of me was still guarded, still calculating, still holding something back even when I didn't want to. And then the question hit me, not gently, sharp, clear. If you tell her the truth, what changes? And I didn't have an answer I liked. Because honesty doesn't just reveal you, it changes how people see you. And I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Not from her, not from the one person who made everything feel quieter. So I sat there, caught between two versions of myself, the one that wanted to be known, and the one that needed to stay in control. And the tension between them, it wasn't loud, it was precise, calculated, like a decision being made in slow motion. Pattern interrupt? Here it is. The strongest version of you isn't the one who hides the truth. It's the one who survives being seen after it, and I didn't know if I could survive that. Not yet. I looked at her again, still asleep, still unaware, still trusting the version of me I had given her, and that's when it hit harder than anything else. She wasn't asking for more, she wasn't pushing, she wasn't forcing anything out of me, which meant, this moment, this choice, it was entirely mine. Tell me something. What do you do when the truth is right there, and the only thing stopping you from saying it is fear of losing how someone sees you? Do you risk it, or do you protect the image and hope it holds? Because I made a decision in that moment, not out loud, not dramatically, quietly, internally, the kind of decision that doesn't feel like a turning point until you look back and realize it was. I exhaled slowly, shook my head just slightly, and lay back down, turning away from her. Not physically at first, mentally, emotionally, choosing distance while pretending nothing had changed. And just like that, the moment passed. The truth stayed where it was, unspoken, unshared, and something inside me settled, not in relief, in resignation. Because once you turn away from honesty like that, it doesn't disappear, it waits, it adapts, it finds new ways to surface. And I didn't realize it yet, but that night, that quiet, almost invisible decision, It didn't just keep my truth hidden, it changed the direction of everything that came after, in ways I wouldn't fully understand, until it was already too late to go back and say what I didn't. And the worst part? I thought I still had time. I really believed. There would be another night like that one. Love doesn't collapse in a moment. It thins out. Quietly. Almost politely. That's the part no one prepares you for. There was no explosion between us, no betrayal, no obvious fracture you could point to and say, that's where it broke. If you had seen us from the outside, you would have said everything was solid, still close, still connected, still working. And that's what made it dangerous. Because nothing was wrong. It just wasn't real anymore. It started in the smallest ways. A question she asked that I answered too quickly. A moment she reached for something deeper, and I redirected it without her noticing. Not manipulation. Precision. I knew exactly how to keep things smooth, how to avoid tension, how to maintain the version of us that didn't require too much truth. And she trusted that version. That's what still stays with me. We'd sit together some nights, same room, same quiet atmosphere, but something had shifted. Not in her, in me. There was this distance I couldn't explain, like I was present, but slightly behind myself, watching the interaction instead of feeling it, analyzing tone, adjusting responses, keeping everything controlled. You ever talk to someone you care about and realize you're editing yourself in real time, not to protect them, to protect what they think of you? That's when it starts slipping, not loudly, just enough that something real gets left out. There was a night. I didn't expect it to stay with me like it has. We were sitting on opposite sides of the room. No tension, no argument, just distance. Soft light, barely touching the walls. The kind of silence that feels neutral, until you sit in it long enough. She looked at me, not confused, not upset, just searching, and asked, quietly, "Why do I feel like you're not fully here sometimes?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't hear her, because I did, too clearly. And in that moment, I had two options again: truth or control. My mind moved fast, faster than the feeling, constructing something safe, something that would ease her concern without opening anything deeper, and I gave it to her. Calm, assured, just enough to close the moment. She nodded, accepted it. But there was something in her expression that lingered a second longer than usual. Something unresolved. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't always leave when you lie. Sometimes they stay and slowly disconnect instead, because they can feel what you're not saying, even if they can't prove it. After that, things didn't fall apart. They just changed shape, subtly. Less depth in conversations, less curiosity in her eyes. Not gone. Just quieter. And I noticed it. Of course I did. But instead of correcting it, I adjusted to it. That's the part I regret, not the silence itself, the way I adapted to it. Like it was easier to maintain something slightly disconnected than to risk breaking it open completely. Pattern interrupt. The moment you start managing love instead of experiencing it, you've already begun losing it. I didn't realize I had crossed that line, because everything still looked intact, but internally, I was moving further away. There were times I almost stopped it, moments where I felt the distance clearly enough to do something about it, say something real, unfiltered, pull her back in. But every time I got close to that edge, that same hesitation showed up. What if this changes everything? What if I say too much, and there's no way back to how she sees me now? So I stayed controlled, consistent, predictable, and slowly. She stopped reaching as far, not because she didn't care, because she was adjusting to what I was giving her. Tell me something. How long can someone feel your distance before they stop trying to close it, before they accept that this is just who you are? Because that's what happened, not overnight, but gradually. The space between us didn't come from conflict, it came from accumulation, every unsaid truth. Every moment I chose comfort over honesty, stacking quietly between us, until it became something real, something you couldn't ignore anymore. And the worst part? I still told myself I was protecting it, protecting us, when in reality, I was protecting the version of me she believed in, at the cost of the connection we actually had. There's a memory I can't shake, not a dramatic one, just a look, a moment where she didn't ask anything, didn't push, didn't question. She just looked at me like she was starting to understand something, without needing me to confirm it, and that look, it stayed. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't been willing to admit before. She wasn't confused anymore. She was adjusting, and once someone starts adjusting to your distance, they stop fighting for your closeness. And I felt it, the shift, subtle, quiet, but irreversible. I could have stopped it. I know that now. There were still moments left, still space to say what needed to be said, but I kept waiting, for the right time, the right words, the perfect version of honesty that wouldn't disrupt anything. But here's the truth I learned too late. There is no perfect moment for honesty, only earlier ones, and later ones. And later ones, they don't always come. Because one day, without warning, without closure, without a clear breaking point, you realize something has already slipped too far, and the silence you thought you were managing has already made the decision for you. And what stays with you isn't what you said, it's what you almost said, what you rehearsed in your head, what you felt in your chest, what you were this close to finally letting out, but didn't. And the question that never really leaves is this: if you had said it sooner, would anything still be different? Or was it already too late the moment you chose silence, that first time?